Hi there, Andy. Welcome to Copy That Pops.
Hi, Laura. It's good to be here.
I know, I'm so excited to have you all the way from, are you in Berlin right now?
Yes, back home in Berlin.
That's awesome. So, okay, but you're not from Germany originally. Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Melbourne, Australia.
And why did you move to Germany?
Good question. That happened at the start of 2012 when I was working in an SEO agency and decided that it was really time for a change and just packed up my stuff. And I spoke to a girl I was living with at the time, asking which city in Europe she would move to because she just got back from a big tour. And she said if I could move to any city, I think I'd move to Berlin. And I'd never been there, but I just bought a ticket and just moved over.
Oh, wow, that's really cool. So,
Yeah, you were living there a year or so ago as well, right?
I know,
Not
I guess,
Berlin, but
no, I know, I guess that's true. We should have explained how we know each other. So, we met in June of 2016 at a digital nomad retreat in Greece. And I was living in Regensburg, Germany, which is in Bavaria in the south. It's just like an hour and a half north of Munich. So it was an easy flight for me to make it out to Greece, versus where I am now in California. That would be a lot bigger of a commitment of a haul to get out there. And yeah, so we got to, was it 10 days?
yep.
Yeah, so we got to spend 10 days right by the water doing cool water activities and mastermind groups and seminars and presentations. You did an amazing presentation on SEO. I did one on podcasting, and now a year and a half later, we're
Bringing the two
back.
together.
Yeah, bringing it back. So, how do you introduce yourself if you were at a business networking event? I know you were just at a conference like a couple weeks ago where Pat Flynn spoke at the DNX conference in Lisbon, Portugal. So when you're meeting people at an event like that, how do you introduce yourself?
I introduce myself as me, and usually from there go into that I'm running an SEO agency with my business partner Kyle Roof, and we are a spread out kind of agency. So we're not your typical agency with an office and a boardroom. We have a small team in Berlin, a small team in Phoenix, and some other staff that kind of spread around the place. So with that, we managed to kind of operate mostly virtually and almost kind of 24/7. So it's a kind of unique way for us to operate a traditional agency, but through the couple of years we've been doing it, we've managed to make it work pretty well actually. And everyone really loves working for us because we don't make them come to work every day. They can work from wherever they like. If they're in either Berlin or Phoenix, they've got an office to come into if they would like, but they don't have to. And we just do SEO all day, every day because we love it. We've got clients from very small businesses up to multinational. And so we get to work on a lot of different types of businesses, a lot of different types of sites. And we have a heavy focus on testing SEO methods as well. So we're not just letting loose with the latest SEO craze that we read on the Moz forum. Everything we do is thoroughly tested before it's put on to anyone's website.
That's good. And how did you get into SEO? What were you doing before, and what kind of sparked your interest in it?
Well, I studied advertising in university, creative advertising, and so I just had an interest in marketing from an early age, and I think that came from having a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. But I ended up not ever working in advertising, and once I finished university, I had a lot of friends who were kind of entrepreneurs, and I ended up working for them in more the tech scene. And so then I was sort of half in sort of tech, but I always kept this interest in marketing. And so it ended up kind of being a little bit of fate, but it was a mixture of those two interests, the professional interest combined with my kind of academic background. And I got given a job as the manager of an SEO team, having never worked in SEO before.
Oh, wow.
And I knew really nothing about it at the time, but it was just a transfer from another position within a larger agency. And so the first thing I had to do was move over to Perth for a little while on the west coast of Australia, where the SEO team was based, and I had to fire everybody and start a completely new SEO team without really knowing that much about it myself. So I really jumped in the deep end and had to learn a lot really fast. So that was a really good learning experience for me. And then, handpicking the people that I wanted in that team enabled me to sort of build the kind of SEO team that I wanted as I was kind of learning. And that ended up resulting in me kind of a few years later starting my own agency.
Very cool. So when was it that you had to jump into the deep end? Put us in time.
That was 2008.
Okay.
So that was 9 years ago.
Wow. Okay. Very cool. So I guess one other question I'm thinking before we jump into some amazing slides that you've prepared to really make this a tangible learning experience to everybody. I feel like right now SEO isn't as hot, or it's not as talked about as much as it was in the past, at least maybe just not in the circles I'm in. But I wondered, what are some reasons that SEO is still so important? Like if someone's kind of like, oh, well, it's okay, but it's sort of an afterthought for them. What are some things you might say to them to say, like, this is super important. You really need to jump in on this.
Well, I think everybody has analytics on their website. Mm-hmm. So a good place to start would be just suggesting that they jump into their analytics, and they can also add something called Search Console to their site as well, which is another free tool from Google. And if they just go in there and see that they're probably actually generating traffic to key pages on their website completely for free through search engines. So although, as you mentioned, for a lot of people, it can be an afterthought, it shouldn't be. Mm-hmm. And often without them actually thinking about it or trying, they're actually getting something out of it that they might not even actually be aware of. So I would encourage them to have a look through their organic traffic in analytics, looking at the kinds of clicks they're getting and to what pages, and also into their search keywords in Google Search Console, which actually shows you the phrases which people are typing in to find your site and gives you some pretty interesting metrics there. And then maybe people will be more interested in diving into it a bit deeper.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's called Google Search Console that people can go and sign up for and just like sync it into their website and start seeing what people are actually typing in to find them. That's amazing. You don't forget Facebook ads for a while. Like you can get stuff totally for free if you're optimizing your site properly.
Absolutely. That's what I'm here to hopefully share with you today.
Yeah, I know. I'm so excited. Okay, so for anyone who's just listening on the podcast, if you go back to the show notes, then you can actually follow along with this as a video presentation. And then Andy has also made available the slides that you can download and use for yourself, which you can find at hvseo.co/CTP for Copy That Pops. Okay, awesome. So
That's right.
So tell us about this presentation. What is it called and what are we going to talk about in here?
Sure. So I just called the presentation How to Write Copy That Pops in Google.
Love it.
So there's three main elements in SEO. The first one is just is the technical side, which is kind of the setup of your website.
Okay.
And then the next part is the on page, which is an industry term, but it's referring to the content on the website mostly. And then lastly is the off page, which is the kind of activity to do with link building, social media, and outreach that happens off the site. So what this is kind of focusing on today, given that you're a copywriting podcast, is the on page side of SEO. So anything around the content to lure people into pages on your site and then to get them ranking and to engage those people on the pages.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I'm just going to go through maybe a few of the things which I thought we would cover through the presentation.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful.
What makes good SEO copywriting to begin with? What actually is it? What does it look like? Keyword research is a super important part. Structuring the content on a page that you're wanting to rank. The epic piece of evergreen content. The rough and dirty approach to creating content for SEO.
Oh, wow.
And then the scientific approach. And in the scientific approach, this is where we're going to use the example of a page on your website, Laura, that I've previously prepared. And that's going to be looking at the term copywriting podcast, I believe, and trying to get you to rank for that.
Mm-hmm. So exciting.
Yeah. And then lastly, just looking at title tags and how they can be an underrated part of this whole process.
Okay.
Should we begin?
Yes, let's do it.
Great. Okay. So the first thing is just setting up your website and choosing a platform for your website to run on. There's a lot of different platforms around nowadays, and it seems like every month there's a new one. Mm-hmm. But we still believe in the good old-fashioned WordPress.org open source platform as a CMS, and I think your website is actually using this, Laura.
Yes, I am built in WordPress. Mm-hmm.
Yep, and there's a bunch of reasons why it's super good in terms of SEO. It's pretty cheap, especially for hosting and stuff like that. You don't have to pay high premium monthly subscription fees like you would with Squarespace or something like that. There's an unlimited number of powerful plugins to help you out that the other systems just don't have, that will save you tons of time and money. The first one that I would recommend, if I could only recommend one, would be the Yoast plugin for SEO. I think there's over 1 million websites now that have the Yoast plugin. It's mostly free and it'll do a lot of things for you. There's tons of online documentation for WordPress. So if you do have a problem, you can usually find a solution. In terms of the negatives, it is open source, so that comes with some security issues. Sometimes you just need to make sure your versions are up to date. There's no official support, but a lot of the premium plugins and software have their own support, so that can be solved pretty easily. Mm-hmm. So what makes good SEO copywriting? First thing, can Google find what you're writing? If Google can understand what it is you're writing, so Google is basically a catalog. Does it know where it needs to categorize your page? Can you get people to actually click on the page? And once they have clicked, do they want to engage with your content or do they just leave? And lastly, does the content produce the desired outcome? So if that's to join a mailing list or download something or go one step closer to making a sale through your website or offline, does it actually produce that? Just quickly on how to put a page together for on-page SEO. Really, the way that we teach SEO is that each page that you're trying to rank in Google needs to be about one thing. And typically you would choose one primary phase for that page to be about. And then you can also choose a number of secondary phrases which are similar and supporting of that primary phase.
Could you give an example?
Yeah, absolutely. Let's take, you know what? I've actually got an example.
Oh, okay, cool.
Maybe if you just wait a couple of slides,
Sure.
we'll give an example. All of these are sort of leading up to the example.
Gotcha.
So
it's kind of like laying the groundwork, and then we're going to look at it like really specifically.
that's right. Yeah.
Cool.
So the key thing here is just make sure that each page that you're wanting to rank for something in Google is just on that one particular topic, and don't be mixing a bunch of different topics together.
Gotcha.
The next thing is just doing your keyword research. Now, I normally start this with a spreadsheet and just some brainstorming. So just based on my own life experience, what kinds of things do I think people would be typing into Google where the content that I've produced is going to be what they're looking for? And so sometimes that means really trying to get into the head of the person searching rather than using industry language and terms which maybe are really familiar to you because you're a specialist, but are not familiar to the people that are actually searching. Mm-hmm. Then to add to this, just doing some searches in Google and looking at what the autocomplete, which is what Google automatically puts into the search box when you start typing, and also the related searches, which are what appear down the bottom. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, like when you search cat food or something, you scroll all the way down, they'll have like cat food for kittens or like other little things below.
Yeah, so here's just one example which I'm going to use later on, but you can see the related searches that we're looking at here for the term sustainability podcast, sustainability living podcast, sustainability business podcast. So they're related terms.
Oh, I actually know the host of the Sustainable Living podcast. I think that's the full name of it.
Do really? Are they based in San Diego as well?
Yeah, she lives in San Diego. Actually, she is German. Oh my gosh, I think I have her card somewhere. Mariana, let's see. Mariana West, we'll shout her out. I've got her card right here. Sustainable Living Podcast. That's so crazy that you just picked that as an example. I'm going to have to tell her. She's going to be excited.
Yeah, it's not actually coincidence. We'll find out why later.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm so intrigued.
We might have to do a little meet and greet.
Yeah. Cool.
So the next step, once you've looked at the autocomplete and related searches as part of your keyword research, is to add those into your spreadsheet. And by this stage, we're getting a little bit of a list. So I'll just show you one example of one I did for you, podcast, Laura, and for people who aren't actually watching. There's just a long list of various keywords to do with copywriting podcasts. So there's writing podcasts, screenwriting podcasts, content marketing podcasts, creative writing podcasts. There's about 18 different words that we've got together. And then we put those into the Google Keyword Planner, which is a free tool that comes in everyone's AdWords accounts, and it's free to get an AdWords account. So that tool will help expand the list further, and it will also tell you how many people are searching for the term every month, because there's no point putting a whole bunch of work into optimizing a page for a keyword, which it turns out that no one actually searches for. And on the other side, there's no point in optimizing a page for a keyword which has so much competition that you're competing against the world's biggest sites, and you're probably never going to actually get anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
like if I optimize for podcasts, like good luck. I'm never going to get that one.
Yeah. And the thing is that mostly those terms are terms that it wouldn't actually necessarily benefit you that much, even if you did rank for podcast, because it's also a lot to do with relevance, and you want a high relevance between the keyword you're optimizing your page for and the solution that you're actually providing in your content. So once you have those keywords in the keyword planner, you can just select more that it's recommending to you, and you can download the whole thing with the search volumes. And then the next step is kind of optional, but you can get what are called keyword difficulty scores from moz.com. It's a tool that has a premium version that also has free tools. And the keyword difficulty scores will tell you roughly how hard it's going to be to rank for those terms out of 100. And typically speaking, if you're doing this yourself, you want scores no higher than probably 25 or 30.
Okay.
So then the next thing is just selecting the keywords you want on the page, and just a little checklist to use for keyword selection. Just type them into Google and see what actually appears, and if it's relevant to your kind of page. Because sometimes you might think that the search results are going to be really relevant to you, but they're actually something quite different. And what Google's actually rewarding for that particular keyword is maybe not what you're actually producing. So forget that keyword. You want keywords that have some search traffic, but depending on what you're actually trying to appear for, you want to choose something that's probably somewhere in the middle. Like if you're trying to sell something that's worth $1 million with your content writing, then if you only have 20 people searching for it a month, that might be okay. But if you're trying to sell a product at the much lower end of the sale, like at the spectrum, like if you're writing content for iPhone cases, for instance, then you're going to want to find more people that are searching for that product, if that makes sense. And the last thing is just making sure that those keywords are just really relevant and potentially with commercial intent. So there's a lot of keywords which are more information-seeking type keywords, and then there's other ones which are more with commercial intent. So if we look, for instance, at this article here written by Pat Flynn on setting up a podcast. So he's optimizing this for non-commercial intent keywords because he's not actually selling anything. He's providing information. It's a tutorial. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And can you tell what he's optimizing for?
Usually, yes. This is a little free tool. It's actually in the show notes. If you want to download it, it gives you all kinds of information on
SEO stats. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, that's right. So what we're looking at right now is what's going on behind the scenes in the structure of this page. And we can see here
very cool.
that Pat is trying to optimize this page for people typing in how to start a podcast. There you go.
Yeah.
So there's probably some keyword research behind that choice.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah, so in on-page ranking, there's 4 main elements of where you can optimize the page. There's the exact match use of the term that you're trying to rank for. So that's the literal word put into the text. Then there's the variations of those keywords, the supporting keywords, if you like. Then there's something we call latent semantic indexing, which sounds complicated, but it's actually just the natural words that come up in the conversation about a particular topic. So I like to use the example of a kitchen. If you're talking to someone about a kitchen, then naturally occurring words that would come up in that conversation might be cooking, fridge, recipes, benchtop, pots and pans, stuff like that. So Google is actually searching your content and it's looking for these kinds of terms within it. And content that ranks well often has a very high density of those kinds of words. The next thing, these are all ranking factors, by the way. These will affect ranking if they're done well. The word count on the page. The word count is something which is not a set amount. There is some guidelines that it should be definitely more than 250 words on a page. And in some cases, writing too much will actually penalize you. So the trick is to finding the sweet spot in the amount of content. And that can be done through counting the number of words on competing pages, which you can usually get that information from like a free word count tool. So really what we're talking about here is the elements to ranking a page, and the trick is to figuring out the volumes, the sweet spot which Google is rewarding for each particular keyword, because it's different. So the next thing I thought we'd just go through is an example of what a good, well-optimized page actually looks like.
Yeah, that'd be great.
And yeah, so this one, it's not pretty, but actually this doesn't really matter. So we're going to look at one. It's by one of our clients, and what they do is they're safety speakers. So they go out to different workplaces, and these are people who have often like lost a limb or something in a workplace injury, and they go out and they talk to people working for big mining companies and in different industries about safety. And for this particular page, what they're trying to do is rank for the term toolbox topics. And you can see what they've done is they've put it right up the very top of the page as the headline in the H1 tag. So you can't get clearer than that. Then they've got a small amount of relevant text underneath. Then a nice feature image, which is authentic as well. It's not taken from stock photography. You can clearly see that. So that's helping to create engagement because there's that authenticity. Then they've broken the text below that down into several smaller sections, which are subtopics. So what should a toolbox talk look like? Good toolbox talk topics.
Say that 5 times fast.
Yeah. So, and then underneath that, they've got a list, the top 5 toolbox talk topics, which link out to different blog articles, which are related to toolbox talks, which are like safety talks that they encourage businesses to have regularly to reduce injuries. And so what they've done is they've created this main page and then these secondary blog article pages on fatigue, on eye protection, on near-miss reporting, on drugs and alcohol. And these all link back to the parent page. And that's a really important part of this setup, is having those related blogs linking back to the page that you want to actually rank.
Gotcha. So the main page is linking out to the sub pages, and the sub pages are also linking back to the main page.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So they've done a pretty good job there. In terms of how maybe that could be improved further, is I took a look at the title tags and the meta descriptions, and that's what actually appears in the Google search results for a particular term. You'll see the headline in bold blue, then the URL, and then a description of what the page is about.
Yeah, and actually I talk about that very briefly in a past episode. Let's see, it is episode 94, if anyone wants to go back. I actually mentioned the Yoast SEO plugin that you already mentioned as well.
Okay.
And I kind of give an example of how to write the meta description so that it's optimized for Google to care, like with the keywords you're trying to optimize for, but then also for humans, so it's not boring, which looks like you're going to tell us a little bit more about too.
Yeah, we'll dive a little deeper into that.
Cool.
So as you said, it's important for search engines and also for people to include that target keyword that you've selected in the title tag. And these guys have actually done that. And this is the title tag at the moment, Toolbox Talk Topics, CNB Safe Safety Speakers. So it is on point, but it's kind of boring. And then underneath it's just very brief. It just says find a list of Toolbox Talk topics and learn what makes a Toolbox talk interesting for you and your workers. And so I just had a look at what the other pages were saying that we're competing against for this Toolbox Talk topics. And I came back with something which I think is going to help entice the click more. And I just changed it to Woody, who's the main speaker for the business. Woody's top 5 Toolbox Talk Topics 2017, CNB Safety Speakers. And then underneath it says, James Wood, award-winning safety speaker, provides his top 5 Toolbox Talk topic tips and reveals how to keep your workers interested in safety around the workplace. So just by using just cleverly placed words like reveals and often having those numbers, like the top 5 lists in titles, helps to increase click-through rate. And if it helps to increase click-through rate, that means you're getting more traffic. And Google likes to see that increased click-through rate. It will reward you with improved rankings as well.
And I love also that you
and
incorporated a person. Like it feels more personal now. Like this guy, you're like, oh, who's James Wood?
Yeah, who's Woody?
Yeah.
That's right. And the page itself, it doesn't have to be the most beautiful page you've ever seen. If it's providing the content that people are after, that's often more important than having a beautiful page, which is not actually giving people what they're looking for. Yeah. And lastly, I just suggested that they could also make a YouTube video about the page. So just interviewing Woody, he makes a lot of videos anyway, where he just talks about what makes a good Toolbox talk. Put that into YouTube, optimize the description and the title in YouTube, and put a link back to this target page in the YouTube description, and then embed the video into the page as well.
That's smart.
And I think that could give them a few extra places in Google just by doing those two things. They're sitting, like I think when we started this page, that's quite a competitive term actually. They were around 75 or something. And just by optimizing it and not doing anything else except working on the content, they're now sitting, I think, at 12 after about 10 weeks.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, I talk a lot in rankings. I apologize for that, but we measure our success in this game.
Yeah, people are probably like, I want to rank number 1. Let's go.
Yeah, so next I thought the kind of next level step of this is creating that epic piece of evergreen content. So we just showed you before the How to Set Up a Podcast page by Pat Flynn. And this is I spoke to him a couple of weeks ago and he said this is still one of his big traffic pages on his site. And I know a number of people have actually used it to set up their own podcasts as well. So it ranks super well in Google and it brings in a ton of traffic and has done for 5 years, right? So if you put the effort into building really good content, then it can keep delivering traffic for a long time to come. And often you will see that the traffic can actually increase over time. So when you're creating a piece of content like this, you're going to put a fair bit of work into it. So you want to start by seeing, like often what happens is you'll be looking at your stats and you'll notice that something just got traction. There's just one particular article that sticks out that's getting a lot more traffic than the other ones that you've been producing. That can be the sign that maybe this could be your epic piece of content.
Put more
So
effort behind it.
Maybe you didn't deliberately, but there's something about it which is catching the attention of a lot of people. So you can leverage that. Often like tutorials or just original data findings that you've created or trending topics, they can all work quite well in this area. Once you've discovered what kind of content, what piece you want to turn into that epic evergreen content, you can get maybe a designer to work on that page and add more kind of visual component to it and make it look really on point. You probably need to expand on the text because these pieces of content are usually minimum 2,000 words. I think Pat's one is like 6,000 words. You want to put more effort into testing various page titles for the best results over time. So run one title for like a few weeks, check if it had an impact on click-through rate or traffic, and then just test different ones until you find which one seems to work the best. Then keeping the content fresh is important. I don't think Pat's actually done this, but if he called it something to do with 2017, how to start a best podcast, and then in 2018, go through and just make sure that everything's still relevant and change the publishing date. That helps. Google likes fresh content. People like fresh content. That's an important factor as well. And then call to actions is an important one. If you're getting a lot of traffic to the page and you put a lot of work into it, you want to make sure that it's paying off. So whatever the intention is, just make sure that you're maximizing that traffic and bringing it into your funnel or whatever. Any questions or anything so far?
No, looks good. Yeah, and I hope people come back and check out the video of this too, because it's so great to see it right in front of you as you're describing this.
Yeah, right. So now we're just going to go into the rough and dirty approach to optimizing one of your target pages versus the scientific approach. So I'm just going to go into this quite briefly. Okay. So the rough and dirty approach first, this works better for less competitive terms or keywords. And basically it just involves guesswork as to whether the page is optimized well or not. You want to make sure that the target keyword that you've chosen is in the title tag of the page, also in the URL of the page, in the H1 tag of the page and other H tags potentially. It's also good to put the secondary terms into the other H tags on the page, fitting it into the body copy and the paragraph text. And just a couple of notes that the meta title and the H1 should actually be the same. Some templates, they'll automatically be the same, but just make sure that they are, and you should only have one H1 on the page. And that's just a signal to Google. It helps Google to understand what the page is about. If you have multiple H1s, it's a sign to Google that you don't really know what the page is about. Oh. Because the H1 is the most important tag for a header on the page.
And so the meta title, that's like what we saw in the example with like Woody's 5 ways or whatever. It was like what people see above the URL in the Google search. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah. Okay. And if you're using WordPress, then you would install Yoast, and underneath each page in the paragraph editor, you'll see a little box for putting your meta titles and meta descriptions in, and it will really help you to write them as well.
Mm-hmm. That's cool, because I never realized that, to use that same thing that you use there as the H1 header inside of the actual blog. That's cool. I have never done that, so I'm going to go back and fix it.
Great. The next thing, just internal linking. It's important that you can get this right. So that target page should have a link from the home page and the navigation on the home page. And then we discussed this briefly before, having those blog posts that you create that are related to the target page, also linking back to the target page. They can link both ways, actually.
So if this is like an epic blog post, would you want the homepage to have a direct link straight to that blog post or straight to the blog in general? Is that good enough, or should it really go back to that epic one?
It's better if it goes directly to the page.
Okay.
Yeah. If you're really wanting it to, obviously you can't link to every single page on your site in your header or in the homepage. You don't want to have links everywhere, and you don't want to have a menu that goes down below the bottom of the page. But the more you can put into the header navigation, that's a big signal to Google that the page is an important part of your site if it's in that header navigation.
Yeah, I'm thinking maybe people could do like best of, and there's like 3, and you link to 3 of your epic blogs or whatever, or like start here, and it's like a couple epic ones that you want to people to get started with. I'm trying to think of how they could work that in.
That's a great idea, actually.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. And I mean, this is not just for blogs either. A lot of the times people have different products, and often we're talking about product or service offering pages rather than just blog articles.
Right.
So just going a little deeper into the structure of the page. We touched on this a little bit, but I just thought I'd use a live example. Yeah. So if we were to try and rank this page here, this is a podcast page as well from my girlfriend, actually. She runs a website called Green Me Berlin, and she wants to rank for the term sustainability podcast. And so she's got this page here, greenmeberlin.com/podcast. And she's not actually optimized the page yet, but if we type in sustainability podcast into Google, we can see your friend here and a few other people. Unfortunately not Cloudy because the page isn't optimized. But the related searches down the bottom, the first one we see, which makes a lot of sense, is Sustainable Business Podcast, because that's exactly what her podcast is actually about. Mm. So if we go back to this page structure example, we might want to put Sustainable Business Podcast in the second header on the page, the H2, and then write a paragraph about Sustainable Business Podcast. Mm. Then if we go back to the related searches again, there's another one here that says Green Podcasts, which is a related term to sustainable, obviously. So we can put that in another H2. And you don't just have to say Green Podcast. You can just add the term Green Podcast to a sentence, such as like in here I've used the ultimate green podcast. And then obviously it has another paragraph of text underneath. And in doing this, although we've got the H1 title tag being sustainability podcast, which is our primary keyword, we can also potentially rank for other keywords which are similar and also may have good traffic on them as well by putting them into subheadings on the page.
Very cool.
So now we've moved on to the scientific approach, and we're going to use the example of your website now.
Cool.
So what the scientific approach comes down to really is that instead of guessing about the density and placement of keywords that we're competing against, we're actually counting them. So this gets pretty technical, and it's better for more competitive terms that you're trying to rank for, but you probably need to either get this done by an agency such as High Voltage or take a lot of time to actually invest in counting these yourself. So for every keyword, there's a different sweet spot in terms of how many times that keyword should be used on the page, where it should be placed, and by getting these things right in terms of what Google is rewarding other pages for, you can give yourself a big advantage. So what we've done here is we ran some numbers for you on the keyword copywriting podcast, Laura. And we're trying to optimize this page on your website, copy that pops/podcast. And if we were able to get you to number one spot in Google for copywriting podcasts, you would probably be able to get another 30 or so subscribers a month. So that's not huge, but it's also for free.
Yeah.
One thing, when we look at this page, we can see it's just a feed of your podcast, which is great, but it's not optimized for search engines. Mm-hmm. And if we have a look at what makes up this page versus your competitors, the first thing we can see is you've got 2,300 words, and the average in your top 10 competitors is actually 1,075. So you've got twice the amount of words on your page as your average competitor does. So that could be good, but it's just one factor. Mm-hmm. The second thing we note is your LSI score. That's the related terms on the page to do with copywriting and podcasts. You're scoring a 70%. You really want to be aiming for a 99%. So we would give you a list of other terms which are related to copywriting and podcasting. I'll show you those in a sec, which if you got those onto the page, it would probably help you to increase your rankings.
Cool.
The next thing is the optimization rate, and this sheet shows that you've got a score of 24% for the optimization rate, which is really about measuring the density of this keyword copywriting podcast use on your page versus the top competition, who is scoring about 70%. So they've used that page they've used that term copywriting podcast on their page maybe about 3 times as much as you have. Mm-hmm. So when Google is trying to work out what your page is about, it's seeing that there's a lot of other pages on the internet which are maybe more relevant to the term copywriting podcast than yours.
Mm-hmm. Makes sense. I need to work that in more frequently.
That's absolutely right. And you probably want to add some paragraph text to the top of the page. Mm-hmm. That's actually describing your podcast.
And I guess logistically, I'm not even really sure how to do that in WordPress. I don't know if that's another conversation, but because right now it's literally just a feed of posts that are tagged as a podcast. So I guess I don't even know how to adjust the page that I can write like an introductory thing at the top.
Yeah, you probably need to use a widget to add some custom text fields to it.
Gotcha, okay.
Which you can probably get whoever helps you with your site to do pretty easily.
No one helps me. I do it myself.
Okay.
I'll Google it.
For it.
Yeah.
So just taking that one step further, this is something which we produce which tells our clients exactly where the keywords should be placed on the page. It's like a map. Oh, wow. When they create a page, where they should place their various keywords on the page. And I mentioned LSI, the latent semantic indexing, the related terms before, and we can see those in this document here. You need to use more terms like episode, hot, marketing. I think hot is maybe the name of one of your competitors. Am I right? Or let's not call it competitor, but
that's
hot copy. Should mention them. Kate, I believe, is another copywriting podcaster.
Yeah, I'm thinking that might be Kate Erickson, who is the girlfriend of John Lee Dumas, who has a huge show, and she has a show called Kate's Take, but she used to do copywriting and stuff, so I think she probably talks about writing a fair amount on there, so that makes sense.
Right, okay. So anyway, you probably don't want to use Kate in your description, but you can get some ideas out of this list on what other words you can put in there, which is going to help Google reward your page for being more relevant and increase the rankings.
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got all the different elements for the page listed here, from the URL through to the H1 tag, through to image alt tags, which is the tag that you associate with images on your page, to bold text. And we've counted the use of all of the different keywords and keyword variations. And this tells you exactly how often to use those. So we're just going to give this to you, and you don't need to follow it to the book, but the more you can action these hints here, then you'll notice very quickly that the rankings of the page will start to increase.
Very cool.
Yeah, so where are we? That is bringing us pretty close to the end now, Laura. I thought I'd go through quickly a little more on the title tags, and would again use the example of copywriting podcast.
Wow.
So the title tags, they're very important because this is where you actually create the click through to your page. It's sort of like an ad for the page, and it's as important as your headline. If you fall flat, then that's it. No one clicks on the page. You don't get any traffic.
Right.
So I like to start by seeing what others are doing when I type in the keyword that I'm trying to rank for. And I see the top pages are usually the ones that have the highest click-through rate that Google is already rewarding for having the titles which people are clicking on. And then I try to create something that's even better. You've only got about 60 characters to do this, and if you go over that, Google will just cut it off.
Yeah.
And you should also try, it'll just have some dots and that will be all you see.
Mm-hmm.
And you should also try and keep your keywords to the front of the title tag, or the important words, rather than the back. So that's what people will see first.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, Google will read the title tag as humans do from left to right, and it considers what you have at the front of it as being probably more important. The same as when it reads your page, it will assume that text at the top of your page is also probably more important.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And just I already mentioned testing different variations of title tags. They're very easy to change and they can have a big effect, especially when you're fighting for those pages, those rankings on page 1, which are much more competitive than the rankings on page 2 or 3. Changing your title tags can be sometimes like the make or break of moving rankings.
Oh, wow.
So looking at what you got already, the page title is Podcast Archives, Copy That Pops, which is pretty accurate description of what the page actually is. It's just the feed of the archives. But
no one wants to click on archive.
No, probably not. So I'm not a copywriter. I'm sure you guys can do so much better than this, but I just came up with 3 ideas. The first one, weekly podcast interviews with copywriting heroes. Copy That Pops podcast, tasty copywriting treats weekly, and copywriting podcast to spice up your text. Listen and subscribe here.
Oh, I like them.
So by updating those, you might find that helps to increase rankings and traffic to the page as well.
Very cool. And while you've got this up, I now see the Hot Copy podcast is done by someone named Kate Toon. So that must be where the Kate is actually coming from, since the word hot, Kate, and Toon were on that list that you showed. And looks like she's the number 1 on there.
Yep, she is for now.
For now. Watch out, Kate.
Laura's coming. Yeah, so hopefully that helps your listeners optimize some of the text that they have in terms of SEO, and helps your listeners to understand that it's free traffic and there's a lot of it out there, and with a little bit of work you can take advantage of it.
Yeah. So do you know where my page right now is ranked? Do you know what number it is or what page it's on by chance? Because I was
So we
thinking,
only measure the top 100 and it's not in the top 100.
gotcha. Because I was thinking I could start implementing what you've taught and then do like a follow-up episode or something where I'm like, okay, here's an update. I'm now on page 6 or something, or, now I'm on page 2 and just kind of document a bit of what changes I make and what works out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah, and the on-page changes tend to affect ranking fairly fast as well. So it might not even take you that long.
Okay, yeah. What would you say someone could maybe expect, like in a situation like we talked about with my example, where there's a good amount of content, but it's just not at all optimized? Like I didn't even think to optimize it. But now that I know these tips and tricks of things to do, if I made them all, how long do you think it would take for me to start seeing some improvements in the rankings and traffic?
You should start seeing results within a couple of weeks.
Cool.
However, at the beginning, you might remember that I said that there's 3 elements to SEO,
Right.
the technical, the on-page, and the off-page. And I would think that Kate Toon in Hot Copy, she probably has more signals than just on-page SEO to get her page there ranking number 1. There's probably quite a few media links and stuff like that going into the page, and that's helping to build the authority and the rankings of it as well. So the on-page is sort of like your base layer, and that will get you so far. It may get you to position 1 or position 3, but what you want to do is to do that first, because you're in complete control of that, and there's nothing stopping you from going out there and just doing it, seeing how far it gets you, and then starting to implement your off-page strategy, like doing more PR-related kind of activities, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Very cool.
Actually, there's some stuff in the presentation, if people download it, on link outreach and blogger outreach and stuff like that,
Nice.
which can get them started, but I'm not going to go into that today.
Yeah, that's a whole nother episode. Cool. So people can go to hvseo.co/CTP to download the slides and get to see everything that we've been talking about, but then also some extra bonuses on how they can implement it.
Yeah, that's right.
Awesome. Well, good. Well, anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't talk about yet, or well, tell us more about what is your ideal client? Some people might be thinking, well, this is amazing, but I don't want to do it myself. What are some things that you help clients do? And if you would be a good fit, how would they reach out to you?
Right. Okay. Well, firstly, if anyone has any just questions at all, we're very happy to respond anytime to them. If people are just after a little free advice. In terms of what we do, normally we start off by just having a conversation with the client and just discussing what their goals and objectives are. And if we think that they're a good fit for what we do, then we prepare a little bit of research, and then if they're happy with that, we begin working on a campaign, which starts with the technical work, and it can go for usually a minimum of like 3 months up to many years. And we work in many different areas. SEO is just a methodology, so it can be applied to many different industries and many different types of sites. Mm-hmm. And we really enjoy the challenge of working on a wide variety. So if you would like to get in touch, then our details are in the show notes.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today and your time before today preparing all this information so it could be a really tangible and tactical approach to what people can do with SEO. So I appreciate it.
Thank you, Laura. It's been great.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to rope you in for a round two, but we'll let you get back to your evening over there in Germany.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.